There is an expression, an idiom that perhaps you're familiar with, and it goes something like this. You can't really know or judge another until you have walked a mile in their shoes. I'm going to say that again. You can't really judge or really claim to know another until you have walked a mile in their shoes. I was contemplating this idiom earlier, and I connected it to this mystic metaphysical understanding of what shoes or feet represent in consciousness. Sunday Mystery School, in some of the Neville texts that we've been exploring, there's this idea of wherever thy sole of thy foot shall tread, that I have given unto you. That's a Bible verse, and it's referring to walking in a state of consciousness, and how wherever you are walking, whatever state of consciousness you are walking in, that's the world that is given unto you. Okay, so connecting this idea of walking a mile in someone else's shoes and then understanding that what those shoes represent is a state of consciousness. Our world is shaped by our state of consciousness, which we can also call a state of being. And it's one thing to accept this as a concept or as an idea and say, yeah, okay, I can see how, maybe my reactions to the world depend on my state, or, maybe, it makes sense, like mindset, if I have a positive mindset, then I'm more likely to engage positively with what happens in my life. And so maybe I'm more likely to live a fulfilled life. But we're not talking about, just kind of commodity ideas or commodity phrases like that. We're talking about literally, we are shaping, molding, chiseling out of the realm of infinite possibilities an experience for ourselves based on where we stand, meaning based on our state of understanding. So we stand under a framework of beliefs about what is true. We stand under a framework of ideas about what reality is. And that framework of ideas, that framework of beliefs that determines our state of being, truly is individual to each one of us. And this is why that saying, that idiom, you can't really know or judge another until you have walked a mile in their shoes. That's why that resonates for us culturally. Because I think as a society, we've come to accept that each one of us represents a unique individual perspective on the whole. And that perspective is really filtered or colored by our understanding, what we stand under, the principles that guide the meaning making that we do in our lives. When we observe an event in the realm of our senses, that event is going to be depicted in our awareness by a storyteller. A storyteller is a part of ourselves. It's the aspect. There's a narrator in each one of us that is a storyteller. And when an event happens that we are observing with our senses, that storyteller assigns meaning to that event. And it does that. The source of where that meaning comes from is the shoes that we're standing in. It's our understanding, what we're standing under, that realm of definitions and that realm of applied meanings, that realm that really defines our state of being. Like that state affects the story that the storyteller is relating to us. So this idea of we can't truly know or judge another until we've walked a mile in their shoes recognizes that each of us is in a state, and our reality is individual based upon our state. Now, we are here in Sunday Mystery School exploring Neville's original masterclass. And we're at lesson 4. There's 5 key ideas that are illuminated in this masterclass. And we're at lesson 4. And the title of lesson 4 is There is No One to Change But Self. No one to change but self. And contemplating this idea of how do I change myself, and connecting it to this idea of walking a mile in someone else's shoes, understanding that each of us is a unique, individualized perspective on the whole. The only way to change oneself is to change one's understanding, change what one is standing under. So what we stand under, that's the definitions, the filters, the applied meaning making, the evidence of past experiences, everything that we believe and consent to as being true creates our understanding. And then we stand under all of these ideas and listen to the story that is being told through these ideas. So the only way to truly change one's self and thus change the world is to change our understanding. There's a Neville lecture where he talks about this and illuminates it in a very beautiful way. And I'm going to refer to it now as a way of further illuminating these ideas. The title of the Neville lecture is 3 Propositions. I'm just pulling it up here. Three propositions. There we go. And this approach of the 3 propositions really ties into this idea of no one to change but self, and illuminates it beautifully, which is why I'm surfacing it in your attention right now. So there's 3 propositions that we can connect to this idea of no one to change but self. Okay. So the first proposition, Neville says, is that an individual's state of consciousness determines the conditions and circumstances of that individual's life. I'm going to say that again, but now we're going to take ownership of this idea, and we're going to say it from the first person. Okay. So, and you're invited to speak this in your own mind as a way of taking ownership of the idea, just to take it out of the realm of the theoretical and make it personal. My individual state of consciousness determines the conditions and circumstances of my life. A state of consciousness creates my life. That's proposition 1. Proposition 2 is that we, as human beings, have the ability, we have the agency, we have the independence, the autonomy, the freedom of being able to choose with intention, deliberately choose our state of consciousness. We can choose the state of consciousness with which we desire to be identified. It's proposition 2. And then there's the third proposition, which ties the other 2 together. And that is, I can be whoever I want to be. If my state of consciousness creates my world, and I can choose my state of consciousness, I can choose the world that I live in. Okay, so that's 3 basic propositions that really illuminates this idea of, well, no one to change but self. And as soon as I understand there's no one to change but self, I have now unlocked access to unlimited possibilities. Okay? But it's not necessarily as simple as it sounds. And Neville says that in this lecture. He says, well, the most normal, natural question that is asked is, well, if this is true, if our state of consciousness creates our world and we have the ability to select our state of consciousness, then why don't we just change our state of consciousness to a more desirable state? That's the obvious question, right? And the answer is because the state of consciousness that we are currently in is the product of long-term habitual thinking. You and I are the way we are because we are creatures of habit. Those shoes that we walk in, that walk a mile in, right? That shapes our world. Those shoes, we've been walking in them for a while. In fact, we've been walking in those shoes for so long that if we, took apart the shoe and looked at the sole, we'd see that the way that we walk has actually even shaped the sole of the shoe. The shoe is literally conformed to our foot, and we've been walking around. And that didn't just happen the first time we wore it. That happened over time. We molded our understanding. We molded that place that our feet are treading. We molded it over time through habit. We molded our world. We molded our experience of our reality through habit. So to change one's state of consciousness, once we understand that the state of consciousness that we're in now is a product of long-term habit, really, the way to do it is to change our habitual patterns of thinking. To change our habitual patterns of thinking. Now, there's a quote that I'm going to read from this 3 Propositions lecture that I feel like illuminates this beautifully. Neville says, "Now, man finds it difficult to detach himself from the habitual. So this morning, we have brought you these 3 propositions, and I hope I can make it clear that you can, with this knowledge, apply it so that you can realize your every objective. It is the height of folly. It is the height of folly to expect changes to come about in your life by the mere passage of time. For that which requires a state of consciousness to produce its effect could not be effective without such a change of consciousness." Okay, so this is that idea of the understanding that we walk in habitually shapes our world. So if the world requires a state of consciousness to be shaped, just merely waiting for the passage of time and assuming that things on the outside will change just simply because time has elapsed is, in Neville's words, the height of folly, of foolish thinking. Nothing changes on the outside through the mere passage of time because the outside requires a state of consciousness to be produced. It's like a factory. It's like something that, like a production assembly line. The reality on the outside is assembled piece by piece from that state of understanding. Whatever we believe and accept to as being true, our state of being produces reliably the circumstances and conditions of our world. It's required. The state of consciousness is required to create the world. So expecting it to just change on its own is the height of folly. The only way to change our experience in reality, the only way to change our reality, is to effect a change in our state of consciousness. So Neville says, I have to be in the consciousness of the thing that I am seeking before I find it. The only thing that I can do is to acquire that state of consciousness. Earlier this week, I did a Neville and Chill live stream on my channel with my good friend Shwetha. And Shwetha and I were talking about everyday manifesting, how to use these ideas not just to shape our reality in meta type ways, but like really practical. Like, okay, I understand that my reality is created by my state of being, and how do I use that for something really simple and material? Like, let's say I lose something and I want it back. How do I use my consciousness to manifest back a lost item? It's a very practical way of relating to a very, very big idea. So Neville is saying, I must be in the consciousness of the thing that I am seeking before I find it. And in this live stream, we were talking about how as soon as we notice that something is missing or that we seem to have lost an item, there's an invitation that occurs, which is to move into a state of, oh, I don't have this thing, and now I'm searching for it. Okay, so you go from the state of having, and then you check, it's not there. There's an invitation immediately in your state of being to move into the state of not having and looking. Now I'm in the state of looking for something that I don't believe I have. Okay. And in this live stream, we were talking about how that's actually the first invitation that we should decline. And what we should do instead, in the moment that we realize that this item appears to be missing, is we should immediately hold the item in our hand in our imagination. We should immediately move into the state of, I have this right now. Imagination created the item, manifested it to begin with. So through imagination, I can recreate the experience of having it once more simply by holding it in my hand and then waiting for my reality to catch up and show it to me again, right? Manifesting it back. It's a very practical way of relating to what Neville says is, I must be in the consciousness of the thing I am seeking before I find it. Okay? So if you're in this consciousness of, I don't have this thing and I'm looking for it, you're not going to find it because you're in the state where that thing is eluding you. The only thing to do is to move into the state where you reconnect to, no, I have this thing. I'm holding it in my hand right now in the true reality, which is my imagination. I must have it. It's right here. I can sense it right here in my imagination. That's the same thing on a micro level as this macro idea that creates our entire life, which is, I must be in the consciousness of the thing I am seeking before I find it. So the only thing to do, whether we're talking about changing our entire life from any aspect, any house of life, from something we don't want to something we do want, or whether we're talking about, where are my keys? I had them a minute ago, now I don't know where they are. Only thing to do is to acquire the state of consciousness where we have what we desire. Let me hold the keys in my hand. Let me feel now the promotion at work. Let me feel now my financial independence. Let me feel the state now of harmony in my relationships. Let me feel the state now of being highly regarded, respected, a noble being in the eyes of others. Let me connect to that state of consciousness and hold it in my hand now. Let me stand under that perspective of state of being, right? Because everything's filtered through. Let me choose an understanding where those are my filters. Let me choose a place to stand, a land to stand on, because remember, wherever the sole of my foot shall tread, that has been given unto me. Let me choose a place to walk with the sole of my foot, where all of those things are already a fact. Let me choose to acquire the state of consciousness that will outpicture the circumstances and conditions of my life. From the very small, here's my keys that appeared to be missing a moment ago, to the very big, here's a whole house of life that I've completely transformed through a renewal of my mind, not by going out and forcing someone into a state of harmony or yelling at my boss because they did not promote me as quickly as I wanted them to. No. I'm not changing anything in the mirror. I am changing myself and allowing the mirror to reflect back to me the new story that I am telling about my reality. Only thing to do is to acquire that state of consciousness. Neville says his definition of a state of consciousness, it is the sum total of all that a man believes and accepts and consents to as being true. I cannot overstate how beautiful a definition this is. Each word in this sentence is chosen with deliberate intention. I'm going to read it again just to really convey this point. A state of consciousness is the sum total of all that we believe, accept, and consent to as being true. Believe, accept, consent, sum total. That defines our state of being. Okay, so Neville talks about how the difference between the rich man, the poor man, the beggar man, the thief, their minds are not different in terms of the very foundation, we all share one mind. What is different in each of those states is the arrangement of the mind. It's where those feet are standing. It's the understanding. It's the state that is different between each of those people. It's rearrangements of the same mind. It's the particles, it's the ideas, it's what they're believing, it's what they're accepting to, it's what they consent to as being true. And this is the key point. Just because we believe it, just because we accept it, just because we consent to it as being true, does not mean that it is true. This opens a little bit of a realm of ambiguity because it's like, well, what is the criteria that we use to define what is true? Is it because I can engage with an object in my senses that is it's implied that it's true because there I can see it? Or is it more, theoretical? What I say is true is true. Okay, so there's a little bit of ambiguity here, but just know that regardless of whether it is objectively true or not, if you believe it is true, it becomes true for you. And it becomes part of that understanding, it becomes part of where the sole of your foot is treading. And that where you're walking in consciousness, that's the world that you're experiencing. So Neville says, it doesn't need to be true. It might be true, but it does not need to be true. It could be false. It could be half true. It could be an outright lie. It could be a superstition. It could be a prejudice. The sum total of all that a man believes constitutes his state of consciousness. Sum total, so all of that put together constitutes our state of consciousness. And this is the key idea. That state of consciousness becomes the house in which we live. Becomes the house in which we live. So when I open my eyes, I'm looking at the house of my consciousness. And it doesn't matter if I'm at home or not. I can be anywhere in this universe. And I open up my eyes and I look around and I measure things with my senses, and I'm standing in the house of my consciousness. I'm standing in the house that is defined by my state. The house in which we abide. And as long as we remain in the house that we are in, as long as the sole of our feet are treading in that state of consciousness that we are in, similar problems will confront us. Our circumstances of life will remain the same. We may move physically, Neville says, across the ends of the earth, and no matter where we go, we will find similar conditions, because it's not the outside that matters. It's only the inside that matters. I'm reminded in this moment of this mystic parable. And I'm just going to give the Josiah version of it. Okay, it's super old. It goes back thousands of years. It's this very old idea, but I'm just going to touch on the idea and give the Josiah version of it. Okay, so it's this idea of there's this man, and he's on a pilgrimage, and he's up in the hills somewhere over in Tibet, and he's traveling between cities, and so he's left one city, and he's headed towards another city, and he's moving through the mountains, and he's walking along the path, and he sees this monk coming down the opposite direction, and he stops the monk and he says, hey sir, I'm just wondering, I see that there's this little village up ahead, and I'm just wondering, what are the people like there? And the monk looks at him and says, well, did you just come from that city over there? And he's like, yeah, I left that city, I'm headed to this village. And he goes, well, what were the people like in the city back there? And the man goes, oh, they were terrible. They were conniving. They were, mean. They were, just really low-minded people. I'm really hoping, like I had to get away from them. And the monk says, oh yeah, no, this village up ahead, same way, right? Okay, so the man continues on, and the monk continues walking towards this city. Another man, similar thing, left the city, comes across this monk. Same question. Hey, I just left this city. I'm headed towards this new village. Did you just come from there? And the monk's like, yeah. And he goes, well, what are the people like in this village? I'm headed there now to visit. And the monk asked the same question. Well, what were the people like in the city you just came from? And he goes, oh, I loved them. They were amazing. There's really good friends, had great time, like met everybody, got to hang out, enjoyed drinks. Like we just so good. And I had to leave, but like I love them so much. And the monk goes, oh yeah, the people in this village, they're the same way. You're going to love them. Right? So the mystic wisdom here is that each of those travelers, each of those men traveling through the mountains, they're carrying with them a state of being. And that is what is creating their experience of the people around them. Has nothing to do with the city that was being left or the village that's being entered. Has everything to do with what we carry with us. So if I'm living in a home, in a city, in a place, and I have a life carved out here, and I'm like, you know what? I really don't like this life. Let me move away and start over. Okay, this is probably a fantasy that some of you have entertained at one time in your life or another. Right? Let me shut down everything here and just move someplace new and start over. Okay, that, according to Neville, would be somewhere along the lines of the height of folly, to believe that just by changing locations you would change your experience of life. Because in truth, there's only one thing to change, and it's the experience of yourself. So if you don't like what's going on in your life in this place, moving to another place is just going to create a new place that has the same features. Okay? Because we're carrying it with us. Wherever the sole of our feet shall tread, right? It has nothing to do with where we are on the outside. It has everything to do with where we are on the inside. Neville says you can move physically across the ends of the earth and you will encounter similar conditions. You cannot get away from the house that you are living in, which is your state of consciousness. That is what creates your reality. In fact, it's not even what it creates your reality. It is your reality. Your state of consciousness is your reality. We can remove the element of separation that says, oh, my state then creates my reality. No, it's one thing. My state is my reality. Neville says, these houses of consciousness, the Bible talks about them as being the many mansions of the Lord. Right? So in my Father's house, there are many mansions. So in that field of unlimited possibilities, there are many states that I could choose to embody. There are many places that I could stand in consciousness. There are many sums of the total of all that I accept and believe and consent to as being true. There's many configurations of states in that field of unlimited possibilities, many mansions. Neville says the Bible refers to them as mansions, as cities, as rooms, as upper rooms. All kinds of words used by these mystic writers, but really each one of them is a way of conveying this idea of an individual state of awareness. And the Bible consistently appeals to us. It all consistently asks us or commands of us to move out and occupy the upper story or the upper place, right? Move to the upper room of the house, move to the upper building of the city, move to the upper place. So to rise in awareness in one's own self, rise to a higher level. Okay, so let's go deeper into this because it's very important that we make this practical. And that's what today's lesson is all about. Our intention is to make this very, very practical. Okay, so what is the most practical thing that we can do? Well, first, we have to see where we are. We have to listen to the state that we are currently in to identify where we are and identify what the upgrades can be. So figure out where we are now so that we can figure out where we desire to move to. Okay, so how do we know? How do we know what state we are in? Because the state is the sum total, and it is unique because each of us are living a unique life experience. So I can't tell you what state you're in. I can see elements of your state. You can see elements of my state, but the sum total Only you in the silence of your own heart can truly know what the sum total of all that you believe and accept and consent to as being true for you. Only you can know. And the way to know is to listen. Is to listen within your own self, to observe your own internal mental conversations. States are created by habit. What is that habit? The habit is self-talk. The habit is inner mental conversations. And this is where this idea becomes very, very practical. Okay, so how do I change my state? I start by listening to my mental conversations. Neville says, the state is singing its own song. The state is singing its own song. The state reveals itself in our inner speech. The mind of man is the mouth of God. The mind of man is the mouth of God. That inner speech, what is God saying? What is the story that God in our mind is speaking based on what we accept, believe, and consent to as being true? That inner speech is the song that our state is singing. So step one is to listen to the state. And Neville says, you have to be honest in this practice. You have to be honest. You have to listen attentively and uncritically. Uncritically. This is something that each one of us must do for ourselves in the silence of our own being. Listen attentively and uncritically, meaning without criticizing, without casting judgment. Listen attentively and uncritically to inwardly what we are saying. And that will reveal the state. It will not surprise you when you do this, that things are the way they are, that life is for you the way it is. For you will hear within yourself the cause of the phenomena of life, the self-talk. Listening attentively and uncritically to the stories being told within our awareness. If we do that, we will, and we're honest, we take that cold, hard look in the mirror of our inner self-talk, and then we look at our life, we will see that the circumstances and situations of our life mirror back to us the inner speech in the mind of our human minds, which is the mouth of God. What we are inwardly saying and doing is far more important than what we outwardly know or seem to outwardly express. Okay, so this is this idea of you could say yes to something on the outside, but in your inner mental speech, it's a hard no. Okay? Now you've split in consciousness, right? You said yes on the outside, but in your inner speech, it's like, no, that's never going to happen. Which of those is going to win? The inner speech will win every single time. When there is a divergence between what you say and what's in your heart, what's in your heart will win every single time. When we know what we are doing inwardly, that is when we are empowered to change it. Okay, so we have to listen to the song that our state is singing before we can begin to recompose it. Neville says, if you have never done this, if you've never uncritically observed your reactions to life, if you are totally unaware of your subjective behavior, then you are unaware of what is causing the world that you're living in. But when you become aware of the state, you simply go about changing it. You simply go about changing it. Okay? Now, what he says next is so relatable and practical. I'm just going to read it straight from this lecture text. He says, "Here's a technique I have found most helpful, and I find it works like a miracle. Anyone can do this. I know that some of you may possibly come from extreme orthodox walks of life, okay? So maybe the dogma of religion, that type of thing. It may seem strange to you to even be here in a place where this type of conversation is happening. But Neville says, I assure you, you are not alone. And many of your leaders, your religious leaders, of the orthodoxy, many of them come to me, Neville, he's saying. I've had many a rabbi in my home, many a priest, many a pastor or a Protestant leader. A lot of them come to me for interpretations of this book. So don't be surprised if you hear things that might startle you. Even your leaders are startled. Okay. So he's kind of like building this bridge of like, hey, this seems a little wild to you. Like, don't be dismayed. There's something here for you. And like, don't be surprised that maybe this is new, because like it can be new. Okay. Here's the technique that is most helpful. Man stands forever in the presence of an infinite and eternal energy, from which this energy all things proceed. But it follows a definite pattern. It doesn't just come out of us and crystallize in some haphazard manner. This energy that is our presence, it is our presence. It follows a definite track. It follows a definite track. And the track that it follows, we lay down for it using our mental conversations. Our internal mind speech lays the tracks that this energy flows over. Man is called upon to change his thinking that he may change his world. We are told, be ye transformed by the renewal of your mind. Meaning, we cannot change our thinking unless we change our ideas, because we think from our ideas. So if I want to change, I want to be transformed, I must lay new tracks for my internal mental conversations, meaning I must adopt new beliefs that I can think from. The tracks I lay down are laid down in my internal conversation. What does it seem that I am saying when I am alone? Whether I'm sitting in a chair or standing over here or walking the streets, there's always something happening in my awareness. There's always this inner speech talking. There's always a dialogue. There's always a narrator. A lot of times we don't even realize that this speech is taking place, because a lot of times we're so distracted, we don't actually sit still long enough to hear the voice that is speaking within us. But inwardly, we are whispering what outwardly takes shape as conditions and circumstances of our lives. Most of the things that we whisper may be negative, justifying our behavior. Neville says there's no need to justify. Maybe our mental conversations are excusing delay or excusing failure. Or maybe our mental conversations have an argumentative aspect to them. Maybe we're judging harshly, or we are condemning someone, something, a circumstance. Neville says many of us have this secret affection for hurt. We don't want to be liked by certain people. We just wouldn't like it if those people liked us. We just don't want certain things to take place in our world, even though they may bring a greater comfort and a greater satisfaction. Sometimes we have this peculiar, strange feeling, this strange little affection for the feeling of being unwanted, for the feeling of being hurt. And so through this strange affection for what we don't objectively want, this feeling of being hurt or unwanted, but then we like to talk about that. Sometimes that begins to dominate our inner speech, or furthermore, sometimes we even speak it out in complaining to others. Neville says we must pull that being that we are, pull ourselves out of that habitual state. Neville goes on to make an analogy here, and I'm seeing if I can describe it without giving the example that he gives, because he's talking about a comic. He's talking about a picture drawn by a comic in a New Yorker magazine. Here's the key idea, though, okay? I love that he gives us as an analogy, but without having the comic in front of us, it's a little difficult to translate. He says, you don't see dishes unwashed within yourself. But if you could see the internal psychological state in which most of us abide, we would see a room that was very dirty. There are unwashed plates within each of us. On the outside, we may wash them, but we are told in the Bible, if we leave the inside unwashed, we become like whitewashed sepulchres. Okay, so it's like, okay, I love this idea of unwashed plates, right? Or like, okay, so have you ever like washed your car on the outside but not vacuumed the interior? So you're like driving around this car that's like bling bling on the outside, but on the inside you're like, oh, it's still really dirty, but on the outside it looks great. Right? That's the analogy for this situation. It's like, oh, on the outside we can buff things up to make it seem like we're in a certain state. But on the inside, if we haven't actually changed anything, all we've done is whitewashed our sepulcher. The sepulcher refers to this idea of this temple that we wear. It's like the appearance on the outside. All we've done is just, wash the outside of the car, but on the inside, it's still filthy. Okay. So if we really want to change, we have to change ourselves. And that's all internal. There's nothing external to do. It's all internal. If there's somebody in the world that I would like to change, another person, partner, friend, family member, I don't need to force you to change. What I need to do is I need to go within and change my attitude towards you. I need to change the place that my foot is standing in relationship to the idea that you are in my reality. If you dislike me, or if I think you dislike me, or if your behavior offends me, the cause of this sense of being offended is not in you. You're not the problem. Your behavior is not the problem. The problem is the cause within myself. Because my inner speech, my inner state, the song that my state is singing is being reflected back to me in the world outside of me. So if I am serious and honest about the search that I undertake for the cause of what I'm witnessing in the world outside of me, if I am serious and honest about my search, I will find that mood within myself that I have kept alive, that is out picturing in the world around me as the behavior of another, as a circumstance, as a situation, as a person, a place, or a thing. But I must be serious and I must be honest. This is where we come back to this idea that this way of living requires boldness. It is not for the faint of heart. It is not for those lacking in courage, Because to take this serious and honest search and to go within and say, whatever I am viewing on the outside, I know that the cause is within me. That requires incredible courage. This is the courage that buys the pearl of great price, which is selling all of your beliefs that something outside of us is responsible for our world. We must completely purge our life of that misappropriation of power. We must take our power back from those concepts and ideas that leak our creative power to illusions in the mirror. We must take that back, find the cause within ourselves, and then change the conversation. So Neville says, the cause of my offense is not in you and your behavior. I must look for that cause within myself. If I am serious and honest about my search, I will find that cause. I will find it inwardly, that when I think of you, it is never a pleasant conversation that I carry on with you. So let me sit down now and bring you before my mind's eye. And as I bring you before my mind's eye, let me imagine a new conversation. Let me imagine a new conversation that would imply a radical change in my world. Let me bring you up in my mind's eye. Let me change my attitude towards you. Let me lay new tracks relative to you for that energy that I am to follow and flow down as it creates my world. Let me find a new place for the sole of my foot to tread. These tracks will then become the tracks across which this eternal energy will pour, an energy which is only thinking and moving across the tracks that are laid down in our inner conversations. And doing this will result in changes in my outer world. Now, here's the key, because we were speaking of how it was habit that created the way that we are. It was habit that created the conversations in our mind. That's why if you really seriously and honestly listen to the song that your state is singing, you will recognize that there is history here. You've been singing it for a while. There's parts of your state that you've been singing for as long as you can remember, your entire incarnation in this body. You've been singing this certain aspect of a state. So it has been developed over time. It's a habit. So to change a habit, it must be replaced with a new habit. So you change the conversation, but not just once. You change it habitually. So you change the conversation. You call forth in your mind's eye that situation. Neville's giving the example of a person. You call forth that person. It can be used for anything. Using the example of a person, you call that person before your mind's eye, and then you completely shift your attitude towards them, and you start to have a new mental conversation relationship to them. And as you do that, you must repeat it. You must repeat this conversation and do it more often. And over time, it becomes a habit. And Neville says, I will find that when I am about my Father's business in the outer world, I am inwardly, through habit, carrying on these changed and lovelier conversations. That perspective that I'm changing in the inner speech of my being, the whole idea is to make it more lovely, to upgrade it, to raise it to the level of love, to a level of loveliness. What would the feeling be like? Well, if there's something that I don't like, chances are there's a part of me that finds it unlovely. So let me make that radical change in consciousness and recast it, rebrand it, revise it, remake it as the potter sitting at the wheel, finding the vessel spoiled. What does the potter do? Reshapes it as it felt good to the potter to do. So if there's a vessel spoiled in my awareness, I reshape it. And how do I do that? By moving the conversation into a place that is lovely. And I find that as I do this, as every time I catch inner speech within my being that is unlovely, I upgrade it to lovely. Over time, I am building the habit of that which is lovely, that which is praise, that which is of good rapport. Think on these things. Cast your world from your inner speech in alignment with what is lovely. Neville says to change your reality, you must transform your consciousness. He says, transform, not alter. You're not just changing your mood. You are transforming your consciousness. It might start with the change of mood because we talk about catching a new mood. We talk about catching the feeling. What would the feeling be like? Were my world the way that I desire it to be? What would the feeling be like if this conversation taking place in my awareness was lovely? Okay, so it starts with the catching of mood, but it doesn't end there. It starts with the catching of mood, and then it graduates to being habitual because you come back to it over and over again. This is that idea of thinking from the Christ mind, thinking from that fourth dimension. Okay, so it's like you're constantly reconnecting to that higher level perspective of I am the cause. All is contained within me. Let me choose to focus upon what I do want, because attention is the life force that I'm flowing in that grows in the garden as the circumstances, situations, people, places, things of my life. Neville says it's nice to change a mood from feeling unlovely to feeling lovely, but I want a transformation. And by transformation, I mean that when one state into which I have moved, I continue to move into it so often that it becomes a habit and it grows stable. That becomes the new house of consciousness in which I live. And we can connect this idea to the mansions in my father's house. I'm living in one mansion. Let's say I choose to desire to live in another more lovely mansion. Okay. I visit it once, and that's like the tour. I take the tour. It's like catching the mood, right? I take the tour of the house and I'm like, yeah, this is a pretty cool mansion. I like this mansion. Okay. And let's say I wake up the next morning and I find myself outside of it. I got to walk right back into it, right? Squatter's rights, right? It's like, no, no, no. Let me come right back into this mansion. So you keep walking right back into that house of consciousness where you desire to live. You keep walking right back into it until you have moved in through your perpetual occupancy of the state. Your perpetual occupancy. You now become a resident. And that is what is meant by transformation. Not just alteration, you're not just changing the mood once. You're moving in to a new way of being, a new internal mental conversation, a new place that the sole of your foot is treading, a new house of consciousness. Neville says this state must become so stable that it expels from consciousness all of its rivals. It's moving into this one mansion and spending so much time there that you stop visiting other mansions altogether and it becomes your primary abode. This is now where I live. All other ideas have been crowded out by my habitual return to this particular state of consciousness. That central habitual state defines my character, and my character is my reality. I'm experiencing my character as my reality. This, Neville says, is a transformation. But if I only do it a little bit, if I only just take a tour, go to the open house of that new mansion that I desire, and then I leave it and go back to my old house, then maybe I had a temporary lift. Maybe for a minute I felt better, but nothing will materially and radically change in my world. This is what Neville in other places has referred to: perpetual construction, deferred occupancy. Right? So it's like, oh, there's this other thing that feels better, can build it in my mind's eye, but then I quickly leave it. I don't actually occupy it. Oh, but I could be this, build it in my mind's eye, quickly leave it. I don't actually occupy it. Temporary lifts of mood, maybe you feel better for a minute, but to actually change your reality, you move into and make as your habitual residence, your permanent mailing address, this new state of awareness, this chosen, deliberately aligned with state of awareness, your state of being, your state of consciousness. And he says, when you have done that, that is when you will notice that your entire life changes, your outer world changes. Signs follow, they do not precede. I move into the consciousness first, and then the world reshapes itself. Neville further emphasizes this inner speech, and I'm going to read this excerpt for you because it's just so beautiful. He says, I cannot stress this too often. I can't give it too great of importance. This wonderful thing that is our ability to talk within ourselves without the aid of anyone in the world. Sitting alone at home, we can construct a sentence that would imply the fulfillment of the ideal. We can construct a sentence which would imply that a friend has realized their objective. Right? We can bless ourselves, we can bless others. We can imply a sentence, we can create a sentence that implies that the thing that someone that we love wants, they now have. What would this person say had they realized their objective? Listen attentively in your inner speech as though you heard it, and you will really hear it if you are still enough. If you go into that place in the silence where all creation takes place and you listen very carefully, very attentively for the sound of that friend's voice, confirming to you that they have what they desire. If you listen in the stillness, you will hear, as though it was happening on the outside, what really you are whispering within yourself. So this is a deeper exploration, a deeper alignment, a deeper dive into the great mirror of our own self. Because part of the mirror, if we just glance at the surface of the mirror, it is the world around us. Right? If you want to see the contents of your consciousness, open your eyes and look around you. You're living in the contents of your consciousness. But the deep mirror is the mirror of our self-talk, our inner speech, our mental conversations. That's the deep mirror, because that is the creative spark, the wellspring from which everything that we experience emerges. It's that inner speech. So that's the deep mirror of our being. You want to see the surface? Just open your eyes and look around. But if you want to see the cause, close your eyes and listen. In a moment here, I'm going to invite the members of the Zoom room who have any comments or contributions to this discourse, this conversation, to share. But before we do that, I just want to kind of reflect on this. So in preparation for this lesson, what really landed for me is this call to taking it seriously. There is a place in this journey that is, very joyful. But I feel like the first step is to get really serious, and to like really reclaim the power, really radically reclaim the power. And then when you have done that, that's when the joy starts to bubble up, because it's like you reclaim the power first, and then you really feel the freedom. You can really taste, smell the freedom that comes from understanding it's all within. We're no longer at the whims. We're no longer the puppets being blown around and buffeted by the storm on the outside. Now we understand that we are the cause, and there's this profound freedom, and with that, joy. So I think for me, just really sitting in the like this call to taking it so seriously, and just really looking at it and really closing my eyes and listening to the song. I love this idea of characterizing it as the song that my state of being is singing, and really honestly and uncritically observing it. And then saying, okay, well, it's fine as it is, but also, what is my ideal? And then having the courage to radically change my attitude, but not just once, to come back to it over and over and over again so that it becomes the new habit. Orlana, I see you're with us. Go ahead.
So, as always, amazing. So I do have a question.
Yes.
Okay. You mentioned the sum total of your life is consciousness, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So I wrote it down. So I said, so if something is not going particularly well in one area, do you have to look at your whole life, your life as a whole? Does that make sense?
I think so.
Okay.
I think I get the what you're getting at there. So you can. So
Okay.
I think what you're getting at is like, okay, well, if the sum total is what creates my life, and then there's something in my life that isn't right, is the sum total responsible for that?
Right.
Just
Exactly.
an element of it. Okay, so let me start by saying that it can be helpful to look at your state as a sum. It can be
Okay.
helpful just to say, okay, well, where I am, where am I in regards to, like, where am I in life? Period. Okay.
Yes.
I do think a finer resolution is
Okay.
to examine the conversations that are habitual, that are on that particular topic.
Okay. Okay.
That is what I feel will really reveal the state
Okay.
that you are in relationship to that, or like where you're standing in relationship to that idea, your attitude.
Okay. So then how, okay. So what if you like are your self-talk is like excellent? Like
Yeah.
how do you like examine really like where your area of what am I trying to say? So okay, I wrote something down. Okay, let me just read it. So I said my inner speech is not reflecting my 3D world. That's what I said. In some ways, in some ways, and I'm not worried about it. I'm not worried about it because what I used to do is like, okay, look at my outer world and not and like worry about that because it's not like reflecting my inner world. And now I'm not worried about it. And I feel in my mind that it's changed, already. So that's why I'm not worried.
Mhm.
So like I guess like how what am I trying to say? Um like so I don't feel like I'm waiting, right? I'm not because I feel like it's here already. But it's not here if but I'm not worried about it.
Mhm.
So
Yes.
does it happen automatically if you feel in your mind that it's really changed? You know what I mean?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, that's what I'm trying to say. Does it
Yes.
because in my mind it's already done and that's why I'm
Yes.
not worried.
Exactly. Yes.
So in your 3D world, if it's not reflecting, does that mean that there's something wrong with my inner thoughts? You know?
So okay, so the real answer to that question is you have to look at your conversations around that topic.
Okay.
But if your conversations are not depicting worry, then there's not a problem with the inner conversations, because your inner
Okay.
conversations are saying,
Right.
no, this is taken care of. So your inner conversations are in alignment. So now we're in the situation where you and I are standing in a community garden, and we're
Yeah.
like, oh yeah, we planted pear trees over there, and you look over there and you don't see them, but you know that we planted them, and it's just a matter of waiting for them to come up, and pretty soon, a couple of years,
Ex-
we're gonna have pears. Right?
exactly.
It's like you're
Exactly.
not worried about the pear trees. They're planted. They're right there. It's all marked out in the garden. Right. So we just accept that it's done. And I'm not worried about the pear trees. I'm not like, oh,
Right.
planted or not. We knew we planted them. We're just waiting for them to arrive. So that's an example of being aligned
Yes.
in the state, and then just trusting and remaining faithful. So you're living in that house, right? You're
Okay.
living in that mansion. You're
Exactly.
remaining faithful to it. So the to really surface the key distinction here. So the other side of that is, if there was some inner conversation of like, well, this isn't quite right, or I wish it was this
Mm-hmm.
other way, or like, why can't it happen faster? Or like what, like if there was some sort of
Yeah.
like little voice that's, kind of irritated about the situation in your mind, that's when you have to take that cold, hard look at the mirror and say, wait a second, there's something in my mind that is creating stagnation because I haven't moved onto a new track.
Right.
I
Okay.
haven't hopped into a new track. But if you're on the track where that thing already is, and you check your,
Right.
you know that it already is, you're there.
Okay. Even though it in the 3D world it hasn't changed.
Yes.
Okay.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
So
Yes.
that's my okay, good. Because it's
Yes.
already done in my head. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So if your habitual state of awareness is that that thing is done, that thing is done. Like I
Okay.
said, it's just that the seeds are planted. It's in its stages of germination. It's everything has its appointed hour. It's
Right.
just a matter of remaining faithful to that state that that thing is done, and
Right.
allowing it to grow in your garden and then bear fruit in your world.
Perfect. Okay. Because I think that's where people get confused
Yeah.
is that they automatically feel okay that your 3D world has to change in order for it to be like really really true in your mind, but it's done in your mind first, right?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
All right.
Yes. Yeah. So that's the state of every visionary who has
Yeah.
ever come to earth and said, I have a vision for something that will be built here, and I may not even see it in my lifetime, but I'm
Right.
going to hold the vision of what this can be and remain faithful to it. And I know that it is done, even if it takes 2, 3, 400 years for
Right.
it to fully grow and develop. I hold that. Right. So
Right.
that's being the state of a visionary, and not relying on the evidence of the 3D to tell you what is true. You're choosing
Exactly.
what is true through your state of consciousness and your state of awareness.
Okay. So for what if for some people, they have bills, you know what I mean? And they need money right away. Like, and they are holding it in their state that they have it already and it's done.
Mhm.
Like, what do you do about something like that? That it's like the 3D world is like really like putting pressure for something like that, you know?
Yes. Yeah. So that's where Neville says, construct the sentence.
Okay.
So it's like, um, uh, so you might say to your partner, like in your mind's eye, you might hear your partner say, or you might say to your partner something like, "Oh, by the way, I paid that bill." And then
Okay.
your mind's eye, maybe you take the bill and you write, paid and a date,
Mm-hmm.
and then you file it in your imagination. You file it in your bill. Like, you do whatever is normal and natural that you would
Yeah.
do were the thing done, and
Mm,
you do that in your imagination first, and then you trust that it is done.
nice.
Yeah.
Good. Oh,
Yes.
so awesome. Okay. Thank you.
You're
Um,
welcome. Thank you,
I
Orlana.
do have a question.
Yes, Angel, go ahead.
All right. So, thank you so much. So from today's teaching, the three propositions. So I'm going
Yes.
to take the second one. We as human beings have the ability of being able to choose with intention our state of consciousness.
Yes.
So let's say we've been in this class, we're learning to do this. We have like overnight subliminals, and we just like what you've just answered with Olena. And then you have people out there that are low vibrational, that we can't help but be around. Maybe they are our co-workers, our relatives and friends. My problem is, you know how it says from last time's teachings, it says there's no power outside of God. There's no power outside of our consciousness. That means people cannot affect us. But I'm finding like usually I'm okay until I go around people and they're talking low vibrational, and then those things start to affect me. And I'm just trying to think, oh my gosh. And then you see now, if you're dealing with Christians, the moment you start to say certain things, it sounds woo-woo to them. It sounds like you're dabbling in some funny, interesting things. So I'm just wondering, should I just be like brave enough and tell them? Of course, they always fight back. But like I'm finding it's affecting me. So is it my consciousness that I need to choose to change and be like they can never affect me, or what?
So this is a fantastic question, and I appreciate you surfacing it because it's one of the ways that we make this teaching very practical. So I'm going to reference to what Neville calls the telephone technique. The telephone technique, it's the basic idea of it is that he had this woman that would write him success stories. And she's like, Neville, I have this telephone technique and it never fails. It never fails. It's 100% reliable. She calls it infallible. And basically what she does it on the telephone, but you can do this just in real time when you're around people as well. What she does is whatever people are saying, like in their speech, she in her mind's eye instantly rewrites it to what is lovely and just hears them saying that in real time. She in the story that he told, the success story that he told, this woman received a call from, we'll call it a niece. Okay, niece calls her and is like, "Hey, I want to take this this exam to become a certified, such and such." And then she immediately dives into all of the reasons why it's not going to work. I'm not smart enough. I don't do well with studying. I'm a terrible test taker. I've had this problem, that problem. Just literally all of the gunk in a person's state. Like, this is what I want, and here's all the reasons why I can't have it. Okay, so Auntie's listening on the phone, completely ignores all of that stuff, and just hears, coming across the wire, just hears, "Hey, Auntie, I want to take this test, and I took it, and I passed it, and now I'm certified." I just literally just rewrites it, even though that other person. This is the key distinction. That other person had all of the blocks in their state imaginable, and frankly should not have passed the test based on all of the low vibration gunk in their state of being. But they weren't really the source of the power, were they? It was the one who was hearing the story on the inside that was the source of the power. So that person who rewrote the story within their own being, they were the ones with the power in that situation. So they just chose to hear what they wanted to hear. So let me apply this to your situation. So you're finding yourself around these other people, and you're finding the conversations to be lower vibration. You're like, "Hey, should I talk to them on the outside?" No. So that would be readjustment of surfaces. Okay. What you want to do is you want to change the conversation on the inside. So you want to hear something that they didn't say, but make it lovely and put it in their voice. Okay. So when we started Sunday Mystery School, we really invested a lot into this idea of being the author. Being the author, we're the first character that we wrote as the author, and then everybody who populates the stage of the world are other characters that really, on a higher level of our being, the fourth dimensional mind, is writing the script for them. It's writing all of the parts. And this is why Neville says when we move into a new state of consciousness and we choose a new way of being, the whole vast world must conform to that. It's like they don't even have free will because we have written the script for them. Okay. This is an opportunity for you to practice writing a new script for these people and then watch them conform to it. And it's going to start in your mind. You're going to write the new script in your mind. Now, right at first, it does take practice to do it in real time. So you may find yourself listening to a whole bunch of gunk. And then when you leave work and you get in your car, you have to sit for a minute and be like, "Okay, I'm going to revise this entire day. And let me just hear one sentence out of this person's mouth in my imagination that would imply that they get it, that everything's great. It's lovely, like a lovely one sentence. Let me just erase this whole part of the script of this drama, that is my life. Let me erase this and make this character say one sentence that would imply something lovely. Okay, so you might start by like waiting until after the fact and revising, but over time you can get really good to where it doesn't matter what any character on your screen is saying, you're hearing what is lovely. And that's another level, because you will watch people, like they will literally be in one state, they'll come into your presence and they will become a completely different person. They can't help but dance differently in your light. That's what it becomes.
Wow, thank you so much. The telephone technique. I'm going to be practicing that. That's really exciting. Thank you.
Practice and report back to us, Angel.
Sure.
Thank you. Paula, it's you.
Oh, I'm just listening.
You're just listening.
Well, actually, I was thinking about saying a little thing. I've had an experience a couple of times where, okay, let's make an example. Let's say that there's a debt that I'm imagining I have paid it off.
Yes.
But it hasn't happened in the three-dimensional world yet.
Yes.
And my partner says something about it, or even asks me about it. And I guess I had been doing such a good job with my imagining that I almost say out loud to him, "Oh, I paid that." But and then I stop myself, because even though I know it's true in the fourth dimensional world, it's a lie in the three-dimensional world, and I would be wrong and bad and lying to him if I said that. So has that happened to anybody else?
I think that's very relatable, Paula. I think that's very relatable. So, and I'm welcome to other suggestions, but the first thing that comes to mind for me is to relate to it from the point of the senses at first, meaning like, oh no, not yet, but like in my mind's eye, immediately reaffirm, oh yeah, it's done. Right.
Yeah.
So that's like my first thought. Maybe there's more nuance to it. And I invite anybody else who has another perspective.
I kind of feel like I'm undermining my imagining if I say I haven't paid it yet, because I was doing all this imagining that I had, but trying to, go by two different sets of rules at the same time.
This is where you say something like, oh, checks in the mail.
Yeah.
Something. Okay. So I'm coming back to this idea that Orlana and I were talking about being in the garden and being like, oh yeah, this place over here, there's pear trees there. But like you look and there's nothing, but you know that the seeds are in the ground, and it's still true to say there's pear trees there. It's just that they're in a state of gestation to where the physical eyes don't see them there yet. So there is a bit of a nuance to this. It's like, okay, well, how do I like be honest and transparent with my partner from a place of like, we are living in a 3D while also remaining faithful to the fourth dimensional perspective. Checking the chat here to see if there's anybody sharing perspectives there. Yeah. So Orlana, do you have any perspective on this?
Say something.
Yeah, no, I was agreeing with you as far as like, I mean, in all actuality, the fourth dimensional world is like the real world. And so so it like, to me, it doesn't matter like what it is, because I'm living in the fourth dimension.
And you're living in the 3D world.
So yeah, it's not a lie to me when this is real. It's not.
I like that. Yep.
Everything starts within the mind.
You've got the voice of wisdom here in the background, Orlana. Everything starts in the mind. Okay, so yeah, so I see what you're saying, Orlana. So I think really, Paula, there's it comes down to this boldness to assert that your imaginal act, it is done.
Yeah,
pretty much.
So it's taking radical ownership of the imaginal act. I'm really curious to see what happens when you do this.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Use your
Very cool. Awesome. All right. Any other contributions from the Zoom room? I see it filled up once I mentioned it here. Any other thoughts here or contributions? Cool. Okay. So I love the I love where we are in this masterclass. This idea of our state of being and just like going really deep into this idea of no one to change but self. We will resume with the text of the masterclass lessons going forward, but I wanted to take a pause in our progression and really focus on this. It's really the primary idea of no one to change but self. It's like when you go through this whole process of understanding the model of reality that we're living in, it's like it really comes down to like, okay, it's all here. This is the key idea. It's really the climax of the 5 lessons. It's like 1, 2, 3, 4, nothing to change but self. And then after this, it's just remain faithful to the ideal. Right. So it's like it's really like the key idea that the whole masterclass is encapsulating and presenting. So, as it has been demonstrated by the members of the channel Mastermind already, this is something to practice. Something to practice, like when you leave Sunday Mystery School, and the first thing should be like, okay, what are my inner conversations? And when anything happens in the world that feels out of alignment, the first thing to do would be to ask, okay, what am I like? Go into the silence. What is the song that my state is singing right now? And does it match the ideal? And if it doesn't, upgrade, but not just once, upgrade in a radical way, and then come back to it over and over and over again. I'm now building that into my house of consciousness, building this new radical change of awareness into my house of consciousness. Beautiful. All right. That does it for today. Thank you, everyone, for joining me. Everyone on YouTube, thanks for being here. I look forward to continuing next week. And until then, imagine wisely, my friends, and we will see you all in the next.